So we are ready to start right now, and good afternoon again. Welcome to our virtual roundtable, Leading the Way Out of Climate and Energy Chaos. How can Ukraine's green recovery unlock rapid decarbonization of the European continent? My name is Svetlana Romanko, and I am the founder and director of the Razom We Stand, a non-governmental organization, Ukraine and international, to support our Stand with Ukraine campaign that united over 800 of organizations in Ukraine and globally. We aim at cutting off the supply of fossil fuel money to Putin and Russia, and as a lever to ending the fossil fuel war and act together to end fossil fuel conflicts and climate chaos and drive the clean energy revolution in Ukraine and globally. And I will be serving as your moderator today. I am ready to help, to keep track on time, and to introduce you our amazing prominent speakers just a bit later. Just to add on the background of this webinar, saying that rather than rebuilding the Soviet era fossil fuel infrastructure, Ukraine can lead on the world in decarbonizing its economy and switching to renewables completely. At our virtual roundtable, we will discuss how to end fossil fuels globally in Ukraine, everywhere. We started doing that with Russian oil, gas, and coal, but we aim to do more and phase out fossil fuels everywhere. So today we will discuss geopolitical, economic, industrial, and environmental benefits of rapid decarbonization of Ukraine and its global significance, along with existential challenges that must be addressed in face of Russian aggression. Ukraine today has the unique potential to become a global showcase for a rapid shift away from fossil fuels. You will be hearing a presentation from leading international and Ukrainian experts and thought leaders who are with us now: Emery Lowins, Bill McKibben, Hiel Kune, Anna Ackerman, and Natalia Andrusevich on this very timely subject. But before we get started, I just wanted to take a few minutes of your time and to explain you how to optimize our work and the convenience of all participants. Please let me remind you of a simple rules. First one, this event is being live streamed and recorded. Video will be available afterwards at our Facebook page. Second, please turn off your microphone and keep your mic just on mute so that sounds do not create a noisy background and our speakers are clearly audible. Ask your questions in the chat. Please keep asking whatever you have some question, and we will get them to our speakers at the end of the webinar. Use the button raise hand in the second part of the event during Q&A session if you want to ask yourself a question to one of the speakers, and be active, enjoy and learn from the event, and join the Stand with Ukraine campaign and Razom We Stand campaigns as well. We will be updating you about the opportunities to join during the whole webinar. So now, very exciting moment. Moving along to our session, please welcome Emery Lowins, who will be speaking to us on green recovery pathways for Ukraine. And to introduce Emery Lowins, Einstein of energy efficiency, as he has been called for the last 5 years, and adjunct professor of civil and environmental engineering at Stanford University, one of the world leading advocates and innovators of energy conservation for 50 years. He wrote his first paper on climate change back in 1968 in Oxford, and in 1976 he offered Jimmy Carter's government a blueprint for how to triple energy efficiency and get off oil and coal within 40 years. As it happens, Emery Lowins has family connections to Ukraine. All 4 of his grandparents were early 20th century immigrants from small villages between Kyiv and Odessa. Emery Lowins is co-founder of Rocky Mountain Institute. And the floor is over to you, Emery, on this interesting topic. And we are very happy to have you here.
Доброго дня, guten Tag, good day. Putin's war focused attention on Europe's immediate fuel crisis and away from the fundamental energy transformation that have both interrupted and accelerated. Yet those deeper energy shifts are truly revolutionary. Proven innovations can raise EU ambitions, prevent future fuel crises, stabilize economies and climate, relieve energy poverty, and speed Ukraine's reconstruction. They can deliver freedom from fuels, durable energy security, safe and clean energy supplies, and declining deflationary non-volatile energy prices as a foundation for a free, independent, and prosperous Ukraine. Can you see the screen and hear me okay? Can you see the screen and hear me okay?
Yes, we can. We can.
Thank you. Putin has just blown up the fossil fuel era. This conceptual sketch shows how, as the pandemic shifted the world's energy use trajectory, actually fossil fuel trajectory, to a bumpy plateau, to be followed by a gentle decline. But now, Putin's war has triggered a response likely to cause a steep decline, like the plummeting blue curve. Putin has set in motion all the outcomes he dreaded, but he's also sped the end of the fossil fuels that underpin his power. If we grasp this unique opportunity, as the EU is doing with impressive focus and resolve, then Ukraine's agony will not have been in vain. And if the EU and US help Ukraine rebuild with the best modern techniques, enabling the new energy system, not protecting the old, then the building stock can be restored to high European energy standards with greater health and comfort, inherent resilience, and lower construction cost. Some elements of Ukraine's next energy system are obvious, from building an industrial heat pumps and electric transport to an open grid and rapid renewable investments. But here I'll focus on some less obvious points. Ukraine will rebuild as the world is passing unique energy inflection points. Peak nuclear power, coal use, auto sales, and fossil power have already happened. IEA says that as the 2020 pandemic slump undid energy's previous 4 years of growth and CO2's 9 years, renewable power grew 45% faster. Renewables are now adding 300 gigawatts every year, enough to supply any future growth, tipping fossil fuels into permanent decline. Therefore, peak oil, peak fossil fuels, and their peak CO2 emissions probably all happened in 2019. So reconstruction offers Ukraine a leapfrog into the post-fossil era. All leading independent analysts agree that worldwide and in EU countries like Poland, Germany, Sweden, and Turkey, wind and solar power produce cheaper power than new and usually existing coal or gas-fired power stations. Those fossil plants in turn produce power 5 to 13 times cheaper than nuclear power, so nuclear isn't financeable without heavy subsidy or mandate and cannot be built in a competitive market. Some countries' nuclear bureaucracies claim it's too costly to integrate solar and wind power reliably into the grid. Actually, the opposite is true. Solar and wind output is variable but highly predictable, so it needs less and cheaper backup than fossil and nuclear plants, whose unexpected failures tend to be larger, longer, more abrupt, and far less predictable. Renewables get faster, cheaper, and easier if we use energy more efficiently. Efficient use is the world's biggest energy resource, bigger than oil. A little history here. Around 1975, US government and industry all said that the energy needed to make $1 of GDP could never drop. A year later, I heretically suggested it could drop 72% in the next 50 years. So far, it's dropped 61% in 46 years, 1/6 faster than the latest EU target, with 28 times greater cumulative impact than renewable growth. Renewables get the headlines because they're visible, while energy is invisible, and the energy you don't use is almost unimaginable. IEA says saved energy delivered half the world's decarbonization in the past 20 years. IPCC says it can deliver 40 to 70% of future decarbonization. Both those numbers are conservatively low, yet the conversation is nearly all about supply. Efficiency techniques, though, are evolving as quickly as renewable technologies. Just the US efficiency innovations already added by 2010 can save another threefold, twice what I originally thought, at a third the real cost. And today, even that looks conservative because optimizing buildings, vehicles, equipment, and factories as whole systems, not as piles of parts, can often make very big energy savings cost less than small or no savings. turning diminishing returns into increasing returns. This paper explains why making energy savings several-fold bigger can actually cost less, because it uses not more but fewer devices, not adding things but omitting them, and not fancier but simpler devices, more artfully chosen, combined, timed, and sequenced. Copper ore bodies and oil reservoirs are finite and depletable assemblages of atoms, but energy efficiency resources are infinitely expandable assemblages of ideas, depleting only stupidity, a very abundant resource. Let me give you a few examples. I live here 2,200 meters up in the Rocky Mountains near Aspen, where temperatures used to dip to minus 44 Celsius, and midwinter cloud can persist for 39 days. Yet, this house does no combustion. That's so 20th century. Super insulation, ventilation heat recovery, and big super windows insulating like 16 to 22 sheets of glass, but looking like 2 and costing less than 3, make this building 99% passive solar heated, 1% active solar. Super efficiency, though, added less construction cost than eliminating the heating system subtracted. So we saved 99% of the space and water heating energy, 90% of the household electricity, and half the water, all with a 10-month payback in 1983. Today's technologies are better and cheaper. The central atrium behind me, seen here in a February snowstorm, has so far produced 80 passive solar banana crops. Though bananas are optional, the house can look like whatever you want and use any building methods or materials you prefer, but still work as well. This has helped inspire several 100,000 European passive buildings with little or no heating and roughly normal construction cost. An integrative design gives many benefits from each expenditure. The white arch behind me or at the top of the upper middle photo has 12 functions, but only one cost. Integrative design let our Empire State Building retrofit save 38%, later 43% of its energy with a 3-year payback. 3 years later, our cost-effective retrofits save 70%, making this half-century-old federal government complex more efficient than what was then the best new U.S. office, which in turn is only a third as efficient as RMI's net positive, no mechanicals passive office near here. And this Bavarian building reportedly uses 2/5 less energy still. So if it were about 14 stories tall rather than 3, it could still probably just run on its rooftop solar power in a climate about 12 Celsius colder than Kiev. Yet all these technologies existed about 2 decades ago. What mainly improved is not so much technology as design. IPCC's decade-old data show that the best European new buildings on the left and retrofits on the right could save up to at least 90% of their energy use without costing more per unit of saved energy. Bigger savings are towards the right in both graphs, cheaper savings are towards the bottom. Even such huge savings in diverse new and old buildings can be very cheap, as you see. The big vertical cost scatter shows the business opportunity to conform inferior projects to best practices, because whatever exists is possible. These apartment buildings in Austria and Germany confirm that passive housing can be affordable in climates like yours. Note the €5 per square meter month rents for the Austrian passive apartments on the upper left. Good German passive house construction now costs about the same as less efficient building, within a few percent either way. The best cost-effective retrofits, like the North German examples at the upper right, are now about 12 to 17 times more thermally efficient than the 1950s German norm at the upper left. You can see the result in the infrared photos at the lower left. The German government has found that the total cost of ownership is much lower with deep retrofits of existing buildings and passive house level new builds than continuing to run and fix buildings incrementally. That should be even more true in post-war reconstruction. The German government also found that deep retrofits have a life cycle cost similar to shallow retrofits. However, while German deep retrofits so far often use costly craft labor intensive methods, as on the lower right, there's now a much cheaper and faster method. Dutch innovators wanted to help Europe retrofit about 15,000 housing units per day for the next 30 years. So they've industrialized mass retrofits of houses and of bigger buildings to net zero energy or better. This Energiesprong method, with streamlined finance and soft costs, is now getting cheap enough to finance entirely from saved energy while extending building life and improving amenity, health, and value. The retrofit bolts on a factory customized tea cozy around your house. It can be installed in as little as a single day while you're off at work, and a larger German building's facade was super insulated this way in 20 minutes. About 80% of total home energy is saved, so the solar roof provides all annual energy needs. Many thousands of such energy strong or energy leapfrog retrofits have been built in Western Europe, with another 20,000 plus planned. This could become the standard method for retrofitting intact or lightly damaged Ukrainian homes, apartments, and commercial buildings, providing comfort even without waiting to rebuild rural power grids. Of the 20 most efficient commercial buildings in North America, RMI's office near here is the most efficient in the two coldest North American climate zones. It has no mechanical equipment except ventilation heat recovery. It's built from structural insulated panels this thick, an excellent choice for Ukraine's reconstruction, and it uses 1/9 the normal amount of gross energy to deliver excellent comfort and satisfaction and economics. Its efficiency and rooftop solar cells run the electric meter backward more than forward. Another useful rural construction option could be straw bale, on which RMI published a 1994 handbook in Belarusian. Industry uses half the world's energy and electricity. RMI's latest $60+ billion worth of industrial redesigns typically found about 30 to 60% energy savings on retrofit, paying back in a few years, and far outperforming the brown zone in the upper left, where most energy service companies deliver disintegrated design. In new projects, integrated design generally yielded about 40 to 90+% savings with lower than normal capital cost. Industry is a very complex field, but simple design changes when rebuilding Ukraine's factories could save much of their electricity, stretching strained supplies and making on-site generation far cheaper and more effective. For example, most electricity runs motors, have to run pumps and fans. Just better pipe and duct design can save 80 to 90+% of friction and therefore pump and fan power. In this house, that saved 97% of the pumping energy and 86% of the pumps. If it were done everywhere, it could save about 1/5 of the world's electricity or half the coal-fired electricity, with paybacks typically under a year in retrofit and instant in new build. To wring out friction, we simply use big pipes and small pumps, not small pipes and big pumps. And to eliminate elbows and their friction, we lay out the pipes first, then the equipment, laying out supply pipes as if they were drains. We bend mines, not pipes. And each unit of energy saved in the pipe saves about 10 units of fuel cost and emissions back at the power station. Ukraine's resourceful workers could learn these super efficient building techniques just by looking at pictures like these. There's no need to learn new theories or to go back to school. One last thought about reconstruction. 15% of the world's CO2 comes from cement and steel, at least half of which are wasted by inefficient structural design that we can improve to save money while rebuilding. For example, substituting tension for compression structures typically looks better, costs less, and uses 1/8 the tons. Pouring concrete into curvy fabric forms, not rigid prismatic forms, can often save over half the concrete by putting strength and stiffness only where they're needed. And then the weight savings compound because you need less strength to hold up less weight. An airy 3D printed bridge can carry mainly its users, while massive concrete structures support mainly their own weight. This beautiful stainless steel bridge was 3D printed. Most importantly, very commonplace, floor slabs are about half the total weight of a typical mid or high-rise building. But a 5-centimeter thick folded concrete slab like corrugated cardboard or a shallow vaulted dome replaces a 30-centimeter thick slab. It costs less and it saves 3/4 of the cement and all of the steel. Then a new building can save a further 15% of core structural materials and 3/4 of the energy while increasing net rentable space by a stunning 55%. Designing out a vertical meter or so of mechanical plenum at each story lets 3 stories with normal 2.8 meter ceiling height fit in the vertical space normally needed for 2 stories. Cost, complexity, and time fall dramatically. Everything gets better. This could be a good way to rebuild destroyed apartment and office buildings, gaining more space faster on less land at lower cost with less emission. Finally, even without integrated design and with all-electric automobiles and a 2.6-fold bigger GDP, U.S. electricity use could shrink 25% by 2050. This quadrupled electric efficiency would save kilowatt hours at an average cost 1/10 their retail price and would avoid much of the time, money, and risk of expanding renewable electric supply. EU policy underscopes this efficiency potential, but Ukraine's reconstruction can exploit and leverage it. The power system is the most capital-intensive sector of the economy. Making things that save electricity needs roughly 1,000-fold less investment than the electrical supply it avoids, and repays that investment about 10 times faster to reinvest again. This enormous capital leverage could be a powerful lever for funding Ukraine's reconstruction. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Emery, for your excellent and very interesting presentation. And we can see questions that are starting to appear in our chat. And just very quickly to take one question, people agree that you are right speaking about energy saving in buildings and how to explain to Ukraine authorities that it's not energy efficiency. They refer to the title of the EU Directive of Energy Efficiency in Buildings. So just maybe very short response right now, if you can, and we will move on. We can't hear you, Emery. Just please.
I'm sure I understand the question. I was talking about efficient energy use in buildings, heat and electricity for appliances and so on. Of course, behavioral savings can also be important, but that's not what I was talking about. We need both.
Yes, thank you. And we will have more time later. And now we are inviting our next speaker, a big friend of Ukraine and Stand With Ukraine coalition as well, Kiel Kunev, the founder and director of the Leave It in the Ground initiative, Lingo. He has been working with NGOs, communities, governments, businesses, and academia on 5 continents over the past 2 decades in search of solutions for sustainability and for accelerating the end of fossil fuel age. And he's main author of an influential article and big report on the world's carbon bombs and Russian carbon bombs, and has been at the forefront of global efforts to keep fossil fuels in the ground for many years. And by the way, Kiel could probably present this in 5 different languages he is fluent in, but up to you, Kiel. Today we've chosen English.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, for inviting me to share here. I would like to center on the conception of energy security that is very important for understanding the current situation and even more important for rebuilding Ukraine. The mainstream understanding of energy security is centers on a model which I describe as keeping a pot full of energy. So you conceive of the economy as a pot of energy and you want to keep it full. And in many countries, renewables are only a small part of that mix, of that energy mix. Certainly in Ukraine, but also in most European countries. And so we have mostly fossil fuels. Many of these infrastructures are very centralized, and efficiency, as Amory has described it, is not very advanced in many places. And I think Ukraine is one of the places where there's a huge efficiency treasure that hasn't been harvested. We're also thinking about the whole economy, how much energy it needs. And this model, this old model of energy security, has been exposed to be not fit for reality. And I think that the invasion of Ukraine and the results of it should be the end of this old model of energy security, because it has shown that it doesn't provide for people, and even many European countries are struggling now to keep their homes warm and their population safe. So before I talk about a new conception of energy security, we have to ask one question, and that is energy for what? So I have prepared this image for you, and if you think that this looks like a target for throwing darts, that's about right, because we have to focus for energy security, we have to focus on the important things first. So the red circle in the center represents physical survival, and here we're speaking about water and food, and also in cold climates about heating in winter, which is essential to survive. Then the second circle are basic needs. Here we may be thinking about electricity, communication, basic transport. And then there are other things that are nice to have, say a family car or a bigger house. And then there are things that are very nice to have, like airplane flights on holiday or a big villa and things like that. And my core argument is that energy security must focus on the core of this target to keep people safe and warm. And we need to allow the luxuries that are more on the fringe to vary. And so far, energy security does not achieve that, not even in the rich countries like Germany. So a new energy security must focus on the basic needs first. And you can see here in this image that if you focus on that and you do it in an efficient way, then the renewable capacity that we have, which is represented by the green here, is already enough to meet those basic needs. And if it is decentralized, it is also much more resilient in the face of crises. And this needs to be renewable in today's world. And there are examples where this is already happening. There are policies, for example, in Mexico, where I reside, electricity tariffs are in steps and stages, and the basic needs of each family is very, very cheap. But if you go above a luxury threshold, it becomes very expensive. So those who are rich cross-subsidize those who are poor. China also has similar electricity tariffs. Or if you think about public transport tickets that were established in Germany in the last months, those cover the basic needs of moving around of a large population. And they could be financed by, for example, taxing on luxuries such as flying airplanes and similar. This is not something to be done on an individual level, but this is rather something for policymakers to design the electricity system in a way that basic needs are guaranteed for everyone, and luxuries are the ones that can expand or contract depending on the energy prices or crisis situations. So that is the new understanding of energy security. And if you doubt that the basic needs could be easily met with renewables, I just want to show you this graph, which a friend of mine has called the champagne glass graphic, which shows that the richest 10% of the world's population are responsible for half the emissions and related half the energy use. So there is a lot of energy being used on luxury things and very little needed for meeting the basic needs of a population. And I highly recommend the work of my colleague, Professor Julia Steinberger, who has been showing year after year in different angles and scientific studies that good life does not need much energy use. So the old energy security model is still in many people's heads, and I do believe that in designing the plan for reconstruction of Ukraine, this old model has guided the process, and it's an all of the above approach where we try to get as much energy as you can, but do not necessarily direct it to the basic needs and to the highest priorities. And the impression is more of some kind of recreation of the Soviet-style model. There isn't a lot of nuclear in there, the most expensive kind of energy, and a lot of fossil fuels, domestic oil, petrochemicals, which doesn't make much market sense, and other things. And 25% renewables in 2032. My question would be, how do you keep it that low in a world that is rapidly transitioning to renewables? And also, as a reminder, we are in the middle of a climate emergency, and we're in the process of causing this runaway climate change that will put the Earth in a hot state with sea level rise 60 meters, and then Odessa will be underwater, and the Caspian Sea will be joined to the Black Sea. And that is something that we cannot ignore, even in Ukraine. So a different vision is to rebuild a renewable energy system, a modern and resilient system without fossil fuels. And I think one thing that I liked about the draft of reconstruction is that it should be cheap, because energy efficiency, as Amory has described it, is the cheapest energy source, and the second cheapest are renewables. So in order to build back better, the focus should be on zero energy buildings, because who wants to pay for heating your house? Who wants to pay for gas to burn if you can design smartly in the first place? Ukraine can also help Europe by seasonally storing gas in existing infrastructure to help balance out renewable variation. And there are other opportunities that I hope my Ukrainian colleagues will talk about. We looked at, as Svetlana said, we looked at Russian carbon bombs and their foreign supporters, and we found that there are 130 billion US dollars of foreign money supporting Russian fossil fuel companies in charge of carbon bombs. And we're asking those foreign investors to divest and invest, to divest from Russian fossil fuels and invest in the renewable rebuilding of Ukraine. And I think there is a historic opportunity right now, and it should be used for rebuilding in a smart way and not going back to the old model. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kiel, for addressing this interesting topic. And we all are curious to discuss it more closer to the second part of our webinar. And now, just to make an introduction of our next speaker, a greatest, the closest friend in fight for Ukrainians' freedom against the climate crisis and for phasing out fossil fuels everywhere. I would like to introduce Bill McKibben, who is prominent environmentalist and a climate activist, and also green journalist. He is the founder of Third Act, a group which organizes people over the age of 60 for action on climate injustice. He has won the Gandhi Peace Prize, as well as honorary degrees from 20 colleges and universities. He was awarded the Right Livelihood Awards, sometimes called the Alternative Nobel Prize, in the Swedish Parliament. Foreign Policy named him to the inaugural list of the world's 100 most important global thinkers. And Bill McKibben helped found 350.org, where we both worked in the past as the first global grassroots climate campaign. And thank you so much, Bill, for being able to join us today. And we discussed with you just a few days ago that to rebuild in full and reinvent a new clean energy empowered Ukraine and other countries of the world, we will need to end the war first. And if Ukraine can defeat Putin and rebuild its economy based on renewable energy rather than fossil fuels, it will be the proof that real change is truly possible, not only for Ukraine, but for many other countries that are still fossil fuel addicted. Ukraine can show other countries around the world that there is a reason to have hope for the future, and demonstrate to petrocrats and petro-autocrats that that time is over, forever over. And now I wanted to pass the floor to you, Bill, and to invite you to speak more on how would you foresee how we end actually this petrocrat domination and addiction to fossil fuels, and how we have a new plan, or so-called Marshall Plan, and how the US can help us and in developing and delivering the goals for this ambitious plan, and how you see the green reconstruction happening in Ukraine and in Europe and globally. Thank you. To you, Bill.
Well, Svetlana, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your incredible hard work this year. Always, of course, you've been working hard for a very long time, but this year has brought extraordinary challenges, and you've done them with real grace, and your Ukrainian colleagues as well around the world really look on with awe and with great gratitude for what you're doing. This is an important hinge moment in world history. My old friend Amory has laid out with his usual precision precisely how possible it is to make this switch, and Kiel as well, really demonstrating that it is entirely possible to do what we need to do. The question is, how do we make it happen fast, faster than it otherwise would? Because speed is everything. Speed's everything in Ukraine and Europe because, well, for the first reason, because it's horrible that there are hundreds of thousands of people living in a war zone now and millions of people displaced from their homes. Speed is everything because winter is coming in Europe, and that's going to increase the political pressure. And speed is everything, of course, because the climate crisis just intensifies every day in just the same way that we're thinking in our hearts today of people in Kherson or Donetsk or wherever. We're also thinking of people in Pakistan, who's 33 million people affected by floods that have destroyed millions of homes. We're thinking of people in Somalia who literally don't have enough food to eat because they're in their 5th straight rainy season with no rain. So we need change very fast. This is maybe a bad thing to say, but Vladimir Putin is helping us realize this in ways that we hadn't quite realized before. First thing is, I don't think there's anyone left in the world at this point who doesn't understand that there's now a tight link between autocracy and fossil fuel. If you depend on a resource that only exists in a few places around the world, the people who sit on top of those few places are going to end up with more power than they should have. And that's the very definition of what's happened in Russia with Vladimir Putin, who has no interesting economy aside from selling oil and gas. And of course, his ability to use that to intimidate others has become one of the main features of this war. So far, thank heaven, the Europeans have shown some resolve, and they've begun to understand the real meaning of this situation for their own plight, which is they have to get off the forms of energy that people can blockade and boycott. One of the good things about the sun and the wind is that nobody, not Vladimir Putin, not the King of Saudi Arabia, not anybody, can blockade the wind, can turn off the tap on the sun. This is our common birthright on this planet. And it is wonderful news that we now have the intelligence and wit to make full use of it. In order to make this happen more speedily, we need people across the world acting with the same kind of forthright bravery that soldiers are acting in defense of Ukraine. We need people standing up in particular to the big financial institutions, the big banks and asset managers that continue to pump money into the fossil fuel industry, and in many cases quite directly into Russia and its energy resources. And we can do this. This is why across the world, we're building out big campaigns to take on these banks, take on these asset managers. And we hope that many of you will join us in that work too, because it sets the precondition for allowing us to move with the speed with which we need to move. Kiel's right. The danger here is that we will just revert back to the same slow pace of change that we were undergoing before this war in Ukraine, instead of it becoming a moment when the world can seize the opportunity to shift course in very dramatic ways, precisely as Amory's very optimistic first graph said was possible. So building movements continues to be crucial here. And one aspect of those movements has got to be making Ukraine, as it rebuilds, a kind of showplace for how the world could be. Look, there's nothing good about having cities destroyed. And watching the brutal way that Russia has prosecuted this war, which mostly consists of blasting cities into smithereens, is a gruesome spectacle. But when it's done, those cities are going to need to be rebuilt. And when they are rebuilt, the opportunity for making Ukraine an absolute showcase for what we can now do is going to need to be a top priority of all the reconstruction and relief efforts that are underway. So the basic bottom line here is speed. And for those of us who aren't soldiers, who are too old or too far away to be fighting, then our contribution is to try and figure out how to build, how to keep that pressure on for speed. Some of it's political, and we were very glad to see the US Congress this year not only supplying large amounts of weaponry to Ukraine, but also pledging to produce heat pumps and things like that for the defense of Ukraine, and also passing a climate bill that will get the US own house in order, begin to anyway. But we need more pressure, more movement building to speed up, to catalyze this reaction. In a weird way, Vladimir Putin has given us an opportunity to speed up the thing that would happen otherwise. And if we're able to, then, well, nothing will make up for the attack on Ukraine, but it will have been able to help spark something all over the world that puts us in a better, safer, more livable place in very short order. So this is the center of the fight. Svetlana, so many thanks for being the leader of this effort here, and to all your colleagues. And just keep telling the rest of us the places where it would be most helpful to be pitching in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you again for your support in the movement building, because truly we were able to build from that very, very hideous reason, but very strong anti-war, anti-fossil fuel movement, anti-fascism movement, and we will be able to tackle climate crisis soon as well, because as we know, all these fossil fuel dependent economies, dictators, and climate crisis and energy crisis and our war and other conflicts share the same roots, and these roots are fossil fuels. And now I am steering towards us towards a more optimistic pathway, which happens when we will be able to defeat Putin and to end the war against our country. And now, as you said, Bill, Ukrainian army is getting some successes on the south of the country. And we believe that similarly, as we defeating the evil, we will have a chance to rebuild in full and become much better than we were even before, taking on the shoulders a lot of Soviet former energy insufficient economy and many, many other burdens. And I have two speakers for you to introduce one by one, who are amazing and leading Ukrainian activists and environmentalists, and both involved in different many ways into the green reconstruction plans of Ukraine. So let's hear from them in particular what has been done already in Ukraine, what we will still have to do, and how we can sparkle this global momentum for change. Not only demanding the European Union to stop embargo on fossil fuels and increase your renewable energy targets, but also to other countries to stop using fossil fuels and elaborate on renewable energy plans everywhere. So I am happy to invite Anna Ackerman, who serves as policy analyst at the International Institute for Sustainable Development. And she's one, as I said, of a leading climate and energy policy professionals in Ukraine and founding member of Ukraine's key environmental NGO, except Razom We Stand as well, but NGO Center for Environmental Initiatives, Eco Action, our great partner. Between 2016 and 2018, she managed the expert energy policy reform group of Ukraine's largest civil society platform, Reanimation Package of Reforms. And Anna holds educational degrees both in energy efficiency and energy management and environmental management. Over to you, Anna. Welcome to our webinar and happy to have you here.
Thank you very much, Svetlana, and thank you very much, Razom We Stand, for organizing this fantastic conversation. I have to say that this is the first time we're actually discussing green reconstruction of Ukraine, and also in this global context. And there will be also upcoming events organized by also other participants very soon. Maybe we could even advertise those too. And one of the reasons why we started on the Now in September was that it somehow didn't feel right back some months ago to be talking about reconstruction to that large degree. And we felt that it was not a good moment. But at the same time, I remember back in the end of March, we had a conversation with the Ministry of Environment when Ukraine's first territories were liberated in the north of Ukraine. And the ministry, they said that they did not expect that we would need to be talking about reconstruction already back then, but only when the country would actually, when the war would be over, that would be a good moment, but not during the wartime. So this is why there are so many processes happening since then. But if I may, I want to also reflect on those things that we heard just now from other speakers about the global context in which Ukraine is, and then move slowly toward the reconstruction. So indeed, as Bill just mentioned also, that this is a fossil fuels war. And in the very beginning of the Russia's large-scale invasion, Ukraine's leading scientist Svetlana Krakowska clearly stated this. This is a fossil fuels war. And indeed, every year, more than 40% of Russia's state budget gets money from the revenues of fossil fuel exports. And then they spend this money to basically invade, to destroy without any valid reason, as we see now. What I have to also say that the world for now has shown an enormous solidarity, and it is crucial at the moment. I hope the solidarity would continue. And there are interesting things which are happening. We already saw previously, just a few years ago, how also globally the world stood for during the coronavirus pandemic, another solidarity test, right? So there was the pandemic, and now there is this war, which is the largest war in Europe for sure since the Second World War. And the next big thing is that our next test for solidarity is fighting the global climate crisis. So the time will show how well we deal with all that, but one comes after another, and we are checking actually what we could do together. And we have only two paths at the moment. I really appreciate Bill also mentioning this. So keep pretending that nothing happened, or speeding up climate action because we see what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Pakistan, that actually fossil fuels are killing people right now, right? It's not anymore about some distant future. It's about things which are happening in this moment. So the world is changing. The countries will have to become more resilient to all the different types of threats. For many, dealing with climate change means food resilience. And also we are standing also the issue now, also again, thanks to Russian aggression. And we see how some countries are whose economy is built on food imports are also discovering that they're not resilient. And for others, energy security is a big issue. And Ukraine will also have to find its unique role in the European transition. Hopefully we'll discuss this a bit later on today. So during Russia's full-scale invasion, we saw many issues and solutions picking up in Ukraine. And I want to mention here 4 Ukrainian cities, 4 stories from Ukrainian cities, which we have to think of every time when we are building the energy systems of the future. I wanted to make 3, but because it's a nice number, but I actually couldn't skip some other ones. First city is Mariupol. Everybody knows Mariupol now, unfortunately, for very bad reasons. But since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion, what's happened? That the city was left without electricity because Russia targeted heat and power systems in Ukrainian main cities, also in Kyiv, and it largely succeeded in destroying, in the very first days, the heating and electricity systems in Mariupol. Without electricity, there is no water, there is no connection, there is no heat, pumps are not running, the city is dead. And then people basically starve, and some actually starve to death. So this is what happens when the electricity system is targeted largely. Then second city I would like to mention is Enerhodar. This is the city where the workers of Europe's largest nuclear power plant live, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. They experienced the new form of terrorism, the nuclear terrorism by Russian troops, with the presence of Russia's nuclear company Rosatom physically present in this power plant. And the world doesn't know how to react. We don't know. We were not prepared. And if Russia allows the next nuclear disaster, what will happen and what would that actually mean to the future of nuclear energy? That's a big question for us. We can also discuss this. Third city I would like to mention is Vuhledar, in the east of Ukraine. The city is in the middle of endless fields in Ukraine's Donetsk region that was built in the 1950s with only one goal: to produce coal. As the coal industry has been in decline in Ukraine for decades already, the city was started actively looking for different solutions, how to diversify the economy, how to have this just transition to other types of the economy. And they created, with support of NGOs, of EcoAction, of other NGOs, a platform for sustainable development of coal mining towns back in 2019. However, as Russia attacked the city, 2 coal mines, which were there in the town, which were bringing all of the money to the budget of the city, they are flooded without possibility of restoration. It means basically that the town has no reason to exist, and that the transition to life without coal fell too quickly upon them. Finally, the city of Slavutic in the north of Ukraine, that during occupation was able to use partially their solar PVs from the energy cooperative. And I think I saw here the head of the energy cooperative, Andrei Zinchenko, here. So they were able to use the solar PVs to charge their phones. And thanks to also diversified heating system, they were also able to produce heat even during the occupation. There are also many owners of small-scale solar PV roofs all around the country that were able to produce electricity even during blackouts by transforming their solar PVs into bringing them into isolated.
Just sorry to interrupt you. Just to remind you that only 1 minute left.
Yes, I'm going
we'll
to
have a discussion later.
Sure. Sorry for taking a bit longer. But basically, it showed the good examples of how some solar PVs can function. And now many solar PVs together with batteries have been installed in the critical infrastructure in Ukraine, like hospitals. So we see that now we have to think of energy resilience, of nuclear terrorism threat, and importance of a social just transition from fossil fuels to clean energy when we design this and update destroyed energy systems. And now to sum up about what's going on in terms of reconstruction, and I'm sure that then Natalia can continue on that. In July in Lugano, in Switzerland, the Ukrainian government has presented the National Recovery Plan, and parties that were participating in this gathering assigned principles for reconstruction of Ukraine. The plan partially looks in a good direction, but I would like to maybe disagree partially with Kiel. It's not really a Soviet-style plan, but more like a wish list of all of the different types of technologies that we could implement, all of different sorts. But then we have to actually make a choice. What do we want? And I think we still don't have this clear idea what we want. So it's more like a wish list of all of different technologies. And Ukraine will still basically need to clarify its role in building the climate neutral European continent, and in building your economic model that would make sure that those millions Ukrainians who are abroad now, who had to escape, that they will return home and that they will want to return to this new construction of the new economy. And one thing that and this is my last sentence, one thing which we understood when we looked at all the different experience of post-war reconstructions, that there is no good experiences in the world of post-Soviet reconstruction. So Ukraine would have to reinvent something, probably will be making many mistakes, but we will have to go ahead and try to make it as good as we can in participation of all the different international partners, of course, and with your support, and hopefully make it good. I'm stopping here. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Anna. And to our next speaker, who is Natalia Andrusevich. She's my friend and colleague with environmental and climate and movement and expert work in Ukraine, and the head of the board of the Resource and Analysis Center, Society and Environment, which is the leading Ukrainian think tank working in the field of environmental and climate policy. Natalia participated in the preparation of a number of monitoring reports on Ukraine's implementation of the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement and many more. For the past 2 years, she has been actively working on Ukraine's involvement in the European Green Deal, including at a city level. The floor is to you, Natalia, and happy to invite you to speak to our participants about the green reconstruction and green recovery. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Svetlana, for presentation and for invitation and for the possibility to speak here. And I'm very glad here to see so many participants, people who are interested in the Ukraine's topic and climate change and other green things. And I fully agree with Anna about with her opinions on plan of the reconstruction of Ukraine, but still it is a draft plan and not finally adopted. And as the current vision of the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine is only being formed by the government of Ukraine and by international partners. So we still have a chance to have a good plan or even better plan. Yeah. So it is important that recovery is understood as both as actual overcoming of the consequences of the war and the strategic development after the war. Therefore, there is an opportunity to lay the foundations for the future of the country, of the development of future of the country. Of course, there are many scenarios in which the process of planning and then implementing the recovery can develop. Conventionally, they can be characterized as ambitious, pragmatic, and business as usual scenarios. The future we choose for Ukraine is the future we'll build for ourselves. Some elements of the Ukraine's post-war recovery process seem to have a common vision of the key partners. Yet there is still an opportunity to influence this overall vision and ensure that the recovery of Ukraine takes the path of the ambitious green recovery model. The ambitious model assumes that our main goals are green. For example, climate neutral or green economy or green growth, sustainable agriculture, etc., as well as the process for achieving them. The ambitious model can be briefly described as a Green Deal of post-war Ukraine. The goals of the model include building the economy of the future when economic growth takes place on the basis of decoupling and decarbonization, a conservation of natural resources, improvement of the environmental quality of life, creating conditions for green investments, etc. To name a few specific instruments and mechanisms of the ambitious model. So first of all, compliance with the requirements of energy efficiency and adaptation to climate change during the reconstruction of infrastructure and settlements and at all stages of recovery. The second one, restoration of critical infrastructure enterprises, taking into account the possibilities of decarbonization and future abandonment of fossil fuels. For example, electrification of heatings and hot water supply during the reconstruction. The next one, setting up or modernizing financial mechanisms to support green recovery. Green financing conditions, funds, green taxonomy, tax benefits, and other types of state assistance. The ambitious model require both the support of international partners, primarily the European Union, and fundamental change in their view of the role and place of Ukraine in the future European and global economy and trade. Building a climate neutral economy in Ukraine is possible only as part of global efforts, becoming part of global chains of added value of such a green climate neutral economy. First of all, Ukraine can be full-fledged partner of the European Green Deal, since we will significantly strengthen the current situation in the EU on a number of issues, if we are considered as a team member in achieving the goals of the European Green Deal. For example, the entire agricultural sector of Ukraine, even in its current status, will contribute to ensuring both EU food security and environmental sustainability of this sector. Just to mention a few indicators, currently the use of pesticides and mineral fertilizers in Ukraine is significantly lower than in the European Union. And a similar situation is observed also in a number of other sectors. For example, railway transportation, climate change indicators, what else, etc. So thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you so much, Natalia. And we do understand, all of us, that it's a very comprehensive topic. We all are doing a lot towards achieving the best we can towards the clean energy transformation, and we will be there. We will be there for sure. But we need a pace, we need a scale, we need a pressure, we need many things, which I am hopeful that our participants will ask us now and today. And the first, I would like to take a few questions which are in the chat and open the discussion. If we will have time, let's say, make it fluent, and let's make it a flow and a flow of energy, I believe. So if we will have some time at the end, we can end with some sentence or two from each speaker, getting on what we have to do next to get to the vision as we want, all of us want, for Ukraine and for the world, because we understand that there are many obstacles and many constraints on our way. But first, I know that Bill needs to leave for another event. So if you do, Bill, would you just put in 2 sentences your conclusion here, and we will ask you a question from the chat. So after that, we will be, saying, passing to others.
Yes, I will just say that this event underscores what an extraordinary opportunity this is, and we have to take advantage of it in Ukraine and around the world. It's obviously a horrible year, but out of that potentially could come a new momentum that will mean everything as we try to head off the climate crisis. And so we have one more set of reasons for which to thank the brave people who are standing up against Putin.
Yes. Thank you. And maybe you would like quickly address, and I also ask probably Emery to respond afterwards as well. So we have questions in the chat, like less questions, more statements that current reality is green. We have increasing fossil fuel subsidies. We also have a recent price cap on oil. So, but we still are not in the vision, not that much close to the vision that we want. And so someone also stated, Andriy, before we reinvent, we need to fail with current centralized recovery efforts, which are now being pushed by the government. So how would you address these questions and concerns from our chat? What we have to, thanks.
Well, just to say that as Amory pointed out, the very rapid fall in the price of renewable energy and the extraordinary economic savings to be realized through energy efficiency should be enough to help knock our governments out of their ruts and their routines. But always remember that there is a big constituency in the fossil fuel industry that wants to keep business as usual as close as possible. So the job of all of us is to simply help weaken the fossil fuel industry at every turn, confident that if we do, there are economical technologies to fill the vacuum that we help create. And so I think that continues to be job number one, to standing up to the fossil fuel industry, because if we're every place we're able to slow it down, good things start happening to take its place. And as those good things start happening, the political power of the fossil fuel industry decreases. Its ability to manage the course of events decreases. All of this would work fine if we had 30 or 40 years to deal with it. But Ukraine doesn't have 30 or 40 years, and the climate doesn't have 30 or 40 years. We need these things to be happening right now at a much greater pace. So our job is just to keep catalyzing that reaction, making it go faster. And I'm sorry that I have to get off, but what a fascinating discussion, and such thanks to everybody here who's represents exactly the kind of view of the world that's coming to the fore now, that's going to replace the old way of looking at things. We pray that it happens at the speed that it needs to. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Bill, and good luck. And we will be in touch always, as we do
Absolutely.
as a Nomads in Movement. And over to you, Emery. Thank you so much. We are deeply grateful that you continued working and answering questions in the chat while we've been speaking. So that's huge. Thank you for that. And what would you add in response to what Bill said about the subsidies and pressure and fossil fuel profits and spiking prices and cost of living crisis approaching Europe? And I'm not even speaking about us Ukrainians. To you, Emery.
I'm actually heading for Europe in a couple of weeks, and I'll get more feel of what's going on in Britain, Hungary, and France. I'm curious how much of what you're doing can be done at a grassroots level without having to reform the energy ministry, and how much could be held up by misalignment among some of the central government forces.
And we all loved, thank you so much for that. And we all loved what you said, that renewable energy revolution has happened. Sorry if you missed it. Would you like to elaborate on that and what we missed and what we yet not missed, where we can succeed?
Well, renewable supply is now around 95% of the world's net additions to generating capacity. And the International Energy Agency expects that to continue, maybe go up a little more. So it's already swept the market. Efficient use fluctuates from year to year with relative prices and policies and many other sources of fluctuation. But broadly, it's the sum of those two, more efficient use and renewable supply, puts us on track now for a 2-degree future. And we need to redouble the pace to get to 1.5 degrees, and probably we'll need to go further than that, since the climate science surprises are bad. I think the bigger picture is that the climate science models understandably continue to be very conservative in understating the speed and runaway potential of climate change. But much less noticed is that the climate choice models, like the integrated assessment models, at least equally understate what we can do to stop climate change. They tend to be over-influenced by economists, under-influenced by engineers and practitioners. And even the IPCC is many years behind just now in the April Working Group 3 report, not for lack of telling them, but they just move very slowly in adopting new thinking. I think if you offset these two kinds of biases between the climate science and climate choice models, you find that the that despair and complacency are equally unwarranted. That is what Jeremy Grantham calls the race of our lives, or the race for our lives, is very much on, and it's getting better and faster all the time, thanks to the efforts of people like you all around the world. We have economics on our side. Efficiency is generally cheaper than renewables. Renewables are cheaper than fossils cheaper than nuclear. And eventually economics does assert itself, regardless of the power of the industries involved. So just before the war, all of the 16, I think, biggest listed oil companies in the world were worth less than Apple. All of the significant car companies in the world, again, combined, were worth less than Tesla. In other words, the insurgents are beating the incumbents. It's a little bit like the story of Ukraine and Russia.
Yes, thank you so much, Emery. And I see a hand from our participant, Andrei. Hello, we will give you a chance to ask in just a few seconds. And I remind to everyone that we still have our chat live. Please do ask questions. If even we won't be able to, and our amazing speakers won't be able to respond during the event, we will come back to you with some short responses afterwards in the email blast or whatsoever. So we still have 13 minutes for questions, and I will like to give a floor to Anna, because she had a hand in the past, and then back to Andrei, and then back to all other speakers, and bring new questions into our space as well, because we have them. So to Anna, and Anna, maybe you also could touch briefly on a very important one. People in Germany outside of the climate bubble now talk about renewables as piece of freedom energies. So we are making equations that renewable energy is a freedom energy, and how can we dive into this narrative to gain momentum for a fossil fuel treaty and 100% renewable energy building in Ukraine?
Right, that's a very good, an excellent question. And I think the freedom energy is exactly what's been happening in Ukraine, and we see how renewables are actually becoming the symbol of the freedom energy in Ukraine. So if you look for stories, if you cannot find them, connect with Razom We Stand or with Eco Action, will provide you with some, because they're amazing, and you can definitely communicate that in your campaigns. I would also like to say that while the economic reasoning behind renewables and energy efficiency are very clear for the US, for many countries, in Ukraine, we would have to make first our homework, because in order to have energy efficiency and renewables as important solutions and economically viable, one day the government would have to take a very unpopular decision and bring prices to the market levels. This will have to happen sooner or later. That would mean that we will have to also support millions probably of vulnerable consumers. And after the war and during the wartime, there is so many. There will be even more than, of course, before the war. So we would have to actually find ways to deal with that. But again, in order to add this economic reasoning to renewables and very important energy efficiency gains that Ukraine could get, it's going to be important. We are discussing this all the time during reconstruction plan discussions, but we'll see how it goes. And I would also like here to comment on Andrei Zichenko's comment about centralization versus decentralization. I think it's a very important point. As he said before, we reinvent, we need to fail with current centralized recovery efforts. Indeed, at the moment, local governments are not really are actively engaged into all of the discussions about reconstruction. And the government is trying also to somehow centralize all of the coming financial support to Ukraine for reconstruction. But at the same time, I see how important it will be, and these kind of mechanisms are also discussed when countries, municipalities from around the world come to Ukrainian cities and actually have projects together and actually search for the possibilities to, rebuild schools, bridges, whatever. But then for that, we would also have to work on sustainability criteria for procurement and do again a huge homework. And I would like to finish with that to not take too much time again. Again, the local governments also they lost so many people because just some left abroad, and how do you return them? How do you find energy managers? How do you do capacity building for local communities so that they could actually have these good projects in place to attract financial resources in the future? There are so many questions, and we will have to be looking for answers all together. In the nearest future.
Yes,
Anna,
thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much, Anna. Do you have a comment? Yes, please go ahead.
I'd like to clarify your first point about distorting energy prices through subsidies, a problem in many countries, including my own. But it doesn't get in the way of promoting efficiency and renewables unless the subsidies are kept away from them and only given to their costlier competitors like fossil and nuclear. Just having general energy subsidies doesn't change the merit order of all the competing types. It may be you have a situation a little like one I ran into in the Soviet Union in the early days of perestroika. I was meeting with a man named Orlov, who was number 2 in the energy section of Gazprom. And he had just started an energy efficiency cooperative in Moscow, which was as close as you could legally come in those days to starting a company. And he said to me, you might think this is not a very promising venture because here in the Soviet Union, we sell energy for just 1/3 of its production cost. But then again, he said, we use it 3 times less efficiently, so the economics work out about the same.
Thank you so much. And to Andriy, please ask your question now. That's a good time.
Okay, so my question is about how there is this guy with his Black Swan, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, and he says about this very interesting concept called information. I forgot the exact term. When there is a asymmetry, yes, information asymmetry on the buyer side and seller side, and we see that information asymmetry when we are buying some kind of Kellogg's food and it says no sugar added, but in fact there is a sugar and maltodextrose in there, which is bad for our health. The same information asymmetry we have here in Ukraine, because general population here is informed that, look, nuclear is cheap, renewables are expensive, and well, Ukraine is quite a poor country, so it sells good. So, the things that are important for us, the climate, it sells bad here. And
what was your question? Please, because it looked like more speech, but please just ask your question. Thanks.
So my question is, how do we overcome the overall asymmetry? How do we bring the idea that the kilowatt hour from nuclear includes lost land due to Chernobyl catastrophe and all the subsidies that went into this kilowatt? How do we do that? I mean, for a wider public, in your opinion?
Yes, great. Thank you so much. And we would be, yes, I guess Emory and then Kiel.
There's a big and excellent Western literature on this, and the easiest place to start would be worldnuclearreport.org. The next edition of this annual will be published in, I believe, Berlin on the 4th or 5th of October. But all the back issues are free online, and it's a wonderful source of well-documented information. It may be that you need different messengers, perhaps from the financial community and the business leadership, to bring this message in Ukraine, rather than only grassroots activists, not respected perhaps for their financial expertise. But we have the same asymmetry, of course, in the West, because people lie about the numbers. But it's harder for them to lie when renewables now are generally unsubsidized and nuclear is more and more heavily subsidized, because even just its operating costs cannot compete without heavy subsidies. So eventually the great cascading torrents of truth come crashing down because the numbers become so obvious to anyone who pays attention. If people are not paying attention, you know much better than I do in your society how to get their attention and expose the lies. And whenever, I mean, it may be that your government is subsidizing energy for lack of the kinds of progressive tariff structures that Kjell described. But that could be a popular idea. And if particular technologies are being subsidized because they're uneconomic, fossil, nuclear, you can point that out and say, you're just trying to make them look cheaper than the things that already are cheaper without subsidy, efficiency, and renewables. And the more actual data you have from Ukrainian experience, the easier that is to show.
Yes, thanks so much, Emery and Andriy, for asking such really comprehensive and important question. And I am passing over to Kjell. And Kjell, if you would like to add to what Emery already responded, and have another question about what is your opinion on Repower EU initiative aiming energy supply security as a cornerstone, and does it mean a step back against prioritization of sustainability of energy production? And as we know, just sadly and regrettably, we had been fighting for so hard for gas and nuclear being get off of the EU taxonomy. But still, now natural gas and nuclear energy are included, we believe temporarily, into the EU taxonomy for green financing.
Yeah, if I may start by that, I see this EU taxonomy as in Germany we have a word, etiquette swindle, like a label swindle. It says sustainable, and what's in there is not sustainable. So, and that's it's quite clear that that is the case. And I mean, I have been participating in the campaigns and supporting all the work by colleagues to try and stop that from happening. We lost that fight. I didn't follow the details, but I think it's a last moment when the fossil industry shows how much control they have over the political system in Europe, that they managed to get their wish. The gas industry, they used to hold the climate ministry. The gas industry was in charge of the climate policy of the EU, and now they wrote fossil gas into the sustainable taxonomy and nuclear, and it's outrageous and it's crazy, and I think it just undermines the credibility of the taxonomy and its use as a tool for deciding on what is a good investment and what is not. And I think that relating to the question of how to tell people that nuclear is more expensive and efficiency and renewables are cheaper, I think you need to make it simple, and I think you can ask yourself, how did I find out about this? How did I learn that this is cheaper? And just tell those stories and find credible voices that people will pay attention to, and make it simple and amplify those messages. If it's a simple message, it will travel more easily, and people will figure it out that some people are lying, or some information out there is not complete. And that is work, to shift the discourse and to get the right ideas out there. And so that needs to be done. And in terms of the subsidies question, I think it shows how we were stuck in this old energy security model, that we did not make many of the basic needs secure. Like Anna said about Mariupol, it was not secure. Maybe people thought before the war Ukraine's energy is secure, but it can break down very quickly if you don't focus on the right things. And this applies to the subsidizing of burning gas for heating your house in the winter, which is of course the right thing right now to do, because there are lots of poor people that won't have warm houses if you don't help them on the financial side. But the better way is to build it in an efficient way, like Amory has shown from many decades ago, you can do that, and that's the right thing to do, and that's the right way to rebuild it. And for the European countries, it's a question to ask, how do we keep our people safe and focus on the key things, and not how do we get gas from Qatar or from Senegal or from fracked gas from the US with much higher climate impacts. That's not the right way. And I think Repower EU has is also influenced heavily by the fossil gas industry and others, driving their agenda, because they have good connections and they still have the political system captured. So I think this moment is also quite telling on the interplay between what people really need and what industries can write into the political agendas, and we have to challenge that very strongly.
Thanks. And we are almost at the very end. We have 3 minutes left. And I'm just giving for the last word, one sentence, please, Natalia. We don't have more time, but maybe you will put your main idea in this sentence to inspire others. And after that, I will show the final slide with our involvement opportunities, and we'll thank to everyone.
Thank you, Svetlana, and maybe I also add a little bit to Andrei's question, because he mentioned a very important thing, which means that it is necessary to work with population. And one of the principles of good governance is access to information, which among other things means that governmental bodies must speak in plain language, explaining people what is good for them and what they are doing about their policy, etc. And on the other hand, there is a good place for the work of non-governmental organizations, different grassroots initiatives to explain people and to help people make the right choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. And now it's time for our final slide. Please just follow us in social media and in everywhere, in Twitter, Facebook. Join our website to sign the petition for embargo on Russian oil and gas. But more importantly, even, we all can find each in social media channels. That's fine, just reflect on this. I wanted to thank you to our amazing speakers. You all are colleagues and friends in the movement, in environmentalism, and we are deeply grateful that you joined us today, and to participants who spent roughly about 1.5 hours of your precious time with us today. Thank you so much. Let's keep in touch. We are thankful to our great Razom We Stand team, who is Oleg Savitsky, Jason Kirkpatrick, and Irina Ptashnik. And we are thankful to Catherine Jabard from ECF, from European Climate Foundation, for their support with every moment of this webinar. And we are grateful to our partners, EcoAction, Resource Analysis Center, Society and Environment, and also to many others who supported us in this organizing effort. Thank you so much to everyone. Stay tuned, look at, just watch our recording and get in touch with us. We are always ready to help you and involve you into some movemental activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this discussion.
Thanks a lot. It was excellent.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks to our excellent speakers.